Okay, hello. Welcome back everyone to Grockit's OGTV. My name's Jim Jacobson. Like it says there, you're watching Grockit.com, and on Grockit.com, this is the 12th edition OGTV. That sounded weird. It's not actually the 12th edition of OGTV, it's the OGTV edition of the 12th edition to the official guide, where we're going through the official guide to the test produced by the makers of the test. Question by question, cover to cover. We left off last time finishing up with question number 110 in the sentence correction section on page 678, and so we are well on our way to finishing. This is in fact the anti-penultimate broadcast from the OGTV. We have just two more after today's, and there we go. Had to get my pen back. Okay, so page 678. Starting off with question 111, you will need to have the book in front of you as always, because I'll be reading it out loud, but we're not presenting it on the screen. So you do need to have the book in front of you to really follow what's going on, especially with sentence correction, which is so grammatical. Construction of the Roman Colosseum, which was officially known as the Flavian Amphitheater, began in AD 69 during the reign of Vespasian, was completed a decade later during the reign of Titus, who opened the Colosseum with a 100-day cycle of religious pageants, gladiatorial games, and spectacles. So, in terms of things that we can look at here, is that we basically have two verbs in the sentence as written. So we have the construction as the subject. And two things about the construction. We find out two things. One is that it began AD 69 and was completed. That's the other verb that goes with construction. Was completed a decade later. The issue here is that when you have two verbs, two or more verbs, the word "and" needs to be before the final one. You know, the construction began AD 69 and was completed a decade later. Choice A is missing the word "and" in it. Otherwise, the tenses are correct, and in every other respect, the modification appears to be acceptable. But with the word "and" missing, it really is not a grammatical sentence. So choice B, construction of the Roman Colosseum, officially known as the Flavian Amphitheater, begun in AD 69 during the reign of Vespasian and was completed. So here we have a tense issue. So began and was completed are both simple past tense. Begun is the perfect passive participle of the word begin, and the participle is not parallel to was completed. So choice B has begun versus was completed. And you know, the dates, of course, make the chronology clear. So it's not necessary to go with a perfect, perfect past perfect tense. And of course, begun isn't the past perfect tense on its own anyway. So choice B, not parallel and not right. Choice C, construction of the Roman Colosseum, which was officially known as the Flavian Amphitheater, began in AD 69 during the reign of Vespasian and was completed a decade later. So choice C has the "and" that we were missing from choice A, and that certainly keeps it in the running in our list of things that could be a correct answer. Choice D, construction of the Roman Colosseum, officially known as the Flavian Amphitheater and begun in AD 69. During the reign of Vespasian, it was completed. Well, so we already have the subject of the sentence, which is construction. But then choice D goes and restates a subject, it, for the main verb. It was completed, which definitely isn't necessary, and in fact is ungrammatical. Also, with choice D, instead of having two verbs paralleling, that construction began and was completed, it uses two participial descriptors, known and begun, to describe the construction, which changes the focus of the sentence a little bit. It's not necessarily wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a stranger way of doing it, but not grammatically incorrect except for the it, which is grammatically incorrect and makes D wrong. So choice E, construction of the Roman Colosseum, officially known as the Flavian Amphitheater, which was begun in AD 69 during the reign of Vespasian and was completed a decade later during the reign of Titus, blah, blah, blah. So all of the verbs in this one come after the word which. The word which is a relative pronoun, and all the verbs that take place after it until we need a comma and then a verb without the word and to break us out of that relative clause. We never actually get that in choice E, and so as a result, every verb in there is part of the series of things that's been started in the relative clause starting with which means that choice E lacks a main verb. So it's not E. Choice C was the only one that was stayed in the running as a possible one, and that is our correct answer. So still 6, 7, 8, 1, 1, 2. As a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb with a rudimentary sense of vision, it would be rated about 20 out of 500, or legally blind if it were an adult with such vision. Okay. The big one that jumps out at me with the sentence as written is the it in the second line of the answer choice A. As a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb with a rudimentary sense of vision, it would be rated about 20 out of 500. That it is actually supposed to be modifying vision. The vision is what's rated 20 out of 500, not the baby. They don't have baby ratings. Well, maybe they do, but not sort of official ones. So that it is supposed to modify vision. The second it, the or legally blind, if it were an adult with such vision, that it is supposed to modify baby. But because we have two its and two reference that it could refer to, it is a terrible choice for the sentence as written. So let's see what the other answer choices do to clarify this ambiguity. Choice B, a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb with a rudimentary sense of vision that would be rated about 20 out of 500, or legally blind as an adult. So it's great until the end. Just that end phrase, or legally blind, is opposing something that's not actually clear. So it's a contrast, and context tells us that it's trying to rename the rating 20 out of 500. But it's not actually clear that that's what's going on. So that last phrase just makes it really awkward, and I mean, let's just see if we can do better than choice B. Choice C, as a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb, its rudimentary sense of vision would be rated about 20 out of 500, qualifying it to be legally blind if an adult. Two things wrong with C. One is, remember, when you have a semicolon, the thing before and after the semicolon, both of them need to be independent clauses, things that could stand alone as sentences with a period at the end of them each. In choice C, the thing after the semicolon, qualifying it to be legally blind if an adult, aside from being awkward on its own, is not a independent clause. So we have a semicolon error. That's a semicolon, not a J. Just take my word for it. Also, the it in that second thing could be referring back to vision, which would make sense. The vision would not be legally blind. So choice C is terrible. We can't use that. Choice D, a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb with a rudimentary sense of vision that would be rated about 20 out of 500. An adult with such vision would be deemed legally blind. Okay, so there we do have a semicolon again. In this case, though, each of the things on either side of the semicolon is an independent clause that could stand alone as its own sentence. And there aren't any pronouns in there that are ambiguous. So choice D is good, and in fact it's definitely clearer than B. It is more wordy. This is one of those cases where if you went with the most concise answer, you would not get it correct, but it's pretty clear. Let's just see if E is competition at all for D. Otherwise, D is definitely our right answer. Choice E, as a baby emerges from the darkness of the womb, its rudimentary sense of vision, which would be deemed legally blind for an adult, would be rated about 20 out of 500. So again, we have this vision, which the vision would not be deemed legally blind. The baby would be deemed legally blind if the baby were an adult. So basically, E, no competition. D was definitely better than B, which had this strange or legally blind as an adult tacked on to the end. If anything, choice B could have said, would it be rated about 20 out of 500, a rating which is considered legally blind for adults. That would have made choice B acceptable, but just having or legally blind tacked on, much less clear than choice D. Last one on 678 is, dun dun dun, number 113. Because there are provisions of the new Maritime Code that provide that even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas, they have already stimulated international disputes over uninhabited islands. Well, choice A is not, just on this initial read-through, it's not grammatically incorrect. There's a few bits of it that are kind of wordy. Because there are provisions and of the new Maritime Code that provide that even tiny islets can be the basis for claims. There's a lot of extra that in choice A, but those aren't grammatically incorrect. They're just extra words. Let's keep going to see if we can find a more concise version of choice A. Choice B, because the new Maritime Code provides that even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas, it has already stimulated international disputes. So the thing that jumps out at me about choice B is the word it. We need to make sure that it can refer back unambiguously to a single referent. And actually every other noun in the sentence is plural except for new Maritime Code. So it does have a clear referent. Choice B is also an option, and it doesn't have all those that's. It's more concise and more clear. Instead of saying there are provisions of the new Maritime Code that provide that, provisions provide, you probably only need one word for providing. I mean, the word provision and the word provide are related. They're the same word, actually. So you really only need it once. And choice B just has the new Maritime Code provides that even tiny islets. So choice B we like more than A, but let's see if there's yet another improvement in C. Even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new Maritime Code, already stimulating international disputes. The big issue here is that we have large sea areas under provisions. And I suppose you could argue metaphorically that these large sea areas are under the provisions of the new Maritime Code, but this modifying prepositional phrase under provisions of the new Maritime Code looks like it's modifying the large sea areas. And really what we're after is it's the it's supposed to modify the whole sentence that under the provisions of the new maritime code, tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields. So this under provisions of the new maritime code is misplaced and wrong. Choice D, because even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime code, this has already stimulated international disputes. Once again, under provisions is in the wrong place. Choice E, because even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime act. I'm just stopping there. It's the same error again in choice E. So under provisions of the new maritime code needs to be not modifying large sea areas. So, and then we decided that choice B was clearly less wordy and more concise and clearer than choice A. So choice B is our correct answer. Gets 2 smiley faces. That's how much better it is. Okay. So on to the 679 page and on to the 114 question. The original building and loan associations were organized as limited life funds, whose members made monthly payments on their share subscriptions, then taking turns drawing on the funds for home mortgages. So once again, we have 2 verbs in our relative clause. The relative clause is whose members. And, it's fine that we're dealing with verbs in a relative clause. That's not, relative clauses are a huge part of writing more complex and still clear sentences in English. So relative clauses are nothing to worry about on the GMAT. Or I should say they're nothing to raise red flags, where you should say, oh, this is very likely wrong. It's just that's where the issue happens to be in this sentence. The main verb, or the main sentence, the independent clause of the sentence is the original building and loan associations were organized. That's the main sentence, but that's all not underlined, so we don't have to mess with it. Okay, so basically the members of the building and loan associations did 2 things. They made payments, and then they taking turns. And if that doesn't highlight the problem, I shall make it explicit. Made payments and taking turns are not parallel. We would need it to either be members were making payments and taking turns, or made payments and took turns. They both should be simple past tense verbs or both participles. However, made payments is in the not underlined portion, so we are going to expect the correct answer to have took turns. Choice A, of course, repeats the original error. Choice B, their share subscriptions and then taking turns drawing. We shift taking turns to drawing for the word that's actually providing the action. Actually, taking turns drawing is the whole action thing, but it's still not parallel, so you can get rid of those. Choice C, made monthly payments on their share subscriptions and then took turns drawing. That's an option. Choice D, made monthly payments on their share subscriptions and then took turns. They drew on the funds for home mortgages. Let me read that again. Whose members made monthly payments on their share subscriptions and then took turns. They drew on the funds for home mortgages. So up until the comma in choice D, it's fine. It has the took turns as opposed to taking turns. The problem is by introducing a new subject, they, and a new verb, drew, without any sort of coordinating conjunction before it, or a semicolon. So they drew on the funds for home mortgages is what's called an independent clause. That could stand alone as its own sentence. When you do that without a coordinating conjunction or without a semicolon, that's what's called a comma splice or a run-on sentence, which is naughty on the GMAT. So So, run-on sentences are not automatically long sentences. You may have learned that wrongly in your previous education. I ran, he jumped is a run-on sentence. That is a comma splice, because each of these could stand alone as its own sentence and is not joined by either a semicolon or a coordinating conjunction or a subordinating conjunction, actually. A word like but or although. If all you have is the comma there, it's wrong. So that's comma splice. Comma splice or run-on sentence. And those are naughty on the GMAT. That's why I get a big red X. Choice E, whose members made monthly payments on their share subscriptions and then drew taking turns. Well, that one's not parallel, so choice C is the only one that has took turns to parallel, made payments, and doesn't introduce any new errors. 6, 7, 9, 1, 1, 5. Gall's hypothesis of there being different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain is widely accepted today. Of there being. Not grammatically incorrect, but definitely wordy. It's possible that that could still be the right answer, so I guess we need to keep it out there. But his hypothesis is that there are different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain. Okay, so of their being is a kind of a very passive and wordy way. And remember, just be suspicious of being and having. The main times that you'll see being and having correct are when they are gerunds, which are verbal nouns, and not when they're participles, which are verbal adjectives. Anyway, choice A, wordy, but I suppose possible. Choice B, Gall's hypothesis of different mental functions that are localized in different parts of the brain is widely accepted today. So it's not actually clear in this one. His hypothesis of different mental functions that are localized in different parts of the brain is widely accepted today. But his hypothesis of something. The advantage that choice A had over B is that it was clearer what his hypothesis actually is. His hypothesis is that these different functions, that's a thing that exists, that different functions are localized in different parts of the brain. In choice B, we're missing those functions, different localized functions' existence. That's what his hypothesis is, and that existence is missing from choice B. So it makes it less clear what his hypothesis actually is. So that makes it less clear even than choice A was with its extra words. Choice C, Gall's hypothesis that different mental functions are localized in different parts of the brain is widely accepted today. So here we have a verb in it, which brings that existence into it. So his hypothesis is that this is what's going on. It's his hypothesis that. You would do the same thing with the actual verb to hypothesize. I hypothesize that different mental functions are localized in different parts of the brain. In choice B, we don't actually find out what he was hypothesizing that, or that he hypothesized that something existed, or his hypothesis of the existence of something. Anyway, choice C, definitely an option and less wordy than A. In fact, I think we can safely cross off A because C is better. Let's see if there's something even better than choice C, though. Gall's hypothesis, which is that there are different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain, is widely accepted today. So remember the word which. When you're kind of explaining something in a non-restrictive sense, Gall's hypothesis, which is that there are different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain, is widely accepted today. That phrase should be set off by commas. So choice D, not right. Choice E, Gall's hypothesis, which is widely accepted today, is that there are different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain. Same issue. The which phrase should be set off by commas because it's a non-restrictive phrase. Without the commas, it becomes a restrictive phrase. Gall's hypothesis, which is widely accepted today, which would actually indicate that there are other hypotheses of his that are not widely accepted. So the hypothesis which is widely accepted today, as opposed to all those other ones that people just laugh at behind his back, is that there are different mental functions localized in different parts of the brain. So if they truly mean it to be a restrictive phrase, normally the GMAT prefers that over which. In English, you can use which in the restrictive sense, but the GMAT really does prefer to use that for the restrictive. You know, that I want the dog that has the biggest brown spots or something. I don't know. That was not the best sentence made up off the top of my head. Anyway, when it's a restrictive thing, when the phrase following that or which is absolutely crucial to identifying which one you mean, there's no comma and it's restrictive, and the GMAT prefers the use of that in those cases. So the which then is wrong kind of, or either way, leaving us with choice C, which is clear and correct. Page 679, number 116. Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years. Excepting for the domains of administration and teaching, the English language was never really spoken on the island. So this is interesting. This is exactly what I was talking about before, where if you have two independent clauses, things that could stand alone as their own sentence. So Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years. That's one independent clause, could stand alone as its own sentence. The other one that could stand alone as its own sentence is the English language was never really spoken on the island. The issue is how to join them. And remember, the only way we can join two independent clauses, and those two independent clauses are not underlined, so we cannot do anything to make them not independent clauses. We have this little bit in between the two of them set off by commas. That's the only part we can change. So remember, the only ways that we can join the two are by semicolon or by comma plus a conjunction. And we have several options there. We do have the comma, no matter what, kind of setting them apart with this, excepting for the domains of administration and teaching. So that part, we have the comma. The issue is getting the correct conjunction in there. The idea of the sentence clearly seems to be that even though this island was a British colony, English wasn't really spoken on the island. So we want some kind of contrasting conjunction, which makes choices C and D jump out at us because those have the word but in them. So anyway, except, and also in the sentence, excepting for is not a correct idiom. So we can get rid of choice A on that basis. We can also get rid of choice D on that basis. Normally you would have either except in or with the exception of, like choice E has or choices B and C have. Anyway, those are correct idioms. Excepting for, not a correct idiom. Anyway, moving on then to narrowing it down between B, C, and E. Choice B, Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years, except in the domains of administration and teaching the English. So there we never actually get the conjunction that we were after to join our two independent clauses, and there's also no semicolon. Choice C, Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years, But except in the domains of administration and English, the English language was never really spoken on the island. That sounds pretty good. Let's check E. Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years, with the exception of the domains of administration and teaching the English language. So there we don't have a conjunction joining our two independent clauses, and still no semicolon either. Choice C is the only one that has the correct idiom for except and a conjunction joining our two independent clauses. And that makes it correct. Page 679, number 117. Oh dear. So again, one of the downsides of doing this as a broadcast is that I have to read people's names in other languages I don't actually speak or don't speak well. Okay, so Georges Sand, Aurore Lucille Dupin, was one of the first European writers to consider the rural poor to be legitimate subjects for literature and portray these with sympathy and respect in her novels. So the idiom that jumps out at me on this one, and this one's a good one to know for the GMAT, is the verb consider. When you're considering something and you're considering that thing, when you think of that thing as something else, the idiom is actually just consider X, Y. I considered it good. I consider the poor legitimate subjects for literature. So you don't need any sort of to be or as, or you don't need anything in here. You can just consider X, Y. Again, I consider it sufficient to not have any sort of thing joining those two. So choice A has the incorrect idiom. Actually, all four of these have consider to be legitimate, consider the rural poor should be, consider the rural poor as being, as if they were. Only choice E has the correct idiom for consider. Also, there's a couple other errors that get introduced. Choices A and B also have these instead of them. Oh, and I completely promised last time to talk about demonstrative pronouns. Demonstrative pronouns are basically going to get used less in I think they're going to get used less on the GMAT than just the regular pronouns. So these, which is the same as this, those are demonstrative pronouns. You're pointing at, you're demonstrating which ones you mean as opposed to some other ones. It's more emphatic, and that emphasis is not usually needed. This is as opposed to them, the singular of which is it. And that's just the simple pronoun meant to just replace some noun that you've already mentioned. So the use of these in A and B is strange. Oftentimes you would the demonstrative pronoun is actually still followed by the noun that you were referring to anyway. These people. It's unusual for demonstrative pronouns to I don't know if I want to say it's unusual, but they basically use differently. I'm thinking of the word this. You would use something like, this is true. So you can use demonstrative pronouns on their own, but they're much more often paired with paired in some way in the same sentence with the thing they're referring to. This pie is delicious. So there, the demonstrative pronoun is pointing directly, and it's right next to the word that it's pointing at. We do occasionally in English have things like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, where the truths mentioned are the things that you just finished, and they're actually in previous sentences. But that's a very kind of rhetorical flourish. Rhetorical flourishes are not usually present on the GMAT. We occasionally see them, but they're not usually there. Anyway, we've been able to eliminate choices A, B, C, D, and E on the basis of the consider idiom here, but A and B also have these strange demonstrative pronoun these. And really the only difference between C and D is at that beginning. Oh, there's also a lack of parallelism. So the basic sentence is that she was one of the first European writers to consider and portray these people, or portray them. So portraying in choice C is not parallel. Whereas choice D at least has portray rather than portraying. But it has that other error. So it's still wrong. Choice E is our correct answer. 679, 118. The World Wildlife Fund has declared that global warming, a phenomenon most scientists agree to be caused by human beings in burning fossil fuels, will create havoc among migratory birds by altering the environment in ways harmful to their habitats. So, things that jump out at me. One is that we have this apposition. Apposition, I'll rewrite that word out here so you know what I'm talking about. Apposition is where you have a noun and then a phrase set off by commas where you rename or explain that same noun. And it can be an entire phrase or an entire clause even. And that's what we have in choice 118. So we have the noun and then renaming or explaining the noun. The World Wildlife Fund has declared that global warming, our noun, a phenomenon most scientists agree to be caused by human beings in burning, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's apposition. So we know that that's what's going on in the sentence. There's definitely an idiom issue here. We have most scientists, actually, let's use which most scientists agree. And the normal idiom there, because we're kind of using, well, it's just the way the word agree works. A phenomenon that most scientists agree is the actual idiom, not to be. Which most scientists agree is caused by human beings. Lastly, then we also have this issue of most scientists agree caused by human beings in burning fossil fuels. The humans are not in burning fossil fuels. You can use in the sense of by. You know, in burning fossil fuels, we are using our environmental resources too quickly, where in there means by, which is good. But when you set it too close to another noun that it could be modifying in a different way, humans, it doesn't make sense for humans to be in burning fossil fuels. This phrase, in burning fossil fuels, the prepositional phrase, needs to be somewhere else if we're going to use it to make it clear, or change the word in to something else. Okay, so those are the things that jump out at me with choice A, or as issues. Let's see what the other answer choices do for us. Choice B, global warming, a phenomenon most scientists agree that is caused by fossil fuels burned by human beings. Well, so there we've corrected our in burning with burned, but we still don't have which most scientists agree is. B doesn't help us. Choice C, global warming, a phenomenon that most scientists agree is caused by human beings' burning of fossil fuels. You can definitely use nouns gerund. You know, as a way that's the normal expression of possession of an activity. The other one, of course, is if you have another noun. Nouns noun, which is an action noun, you know, construction or something. Noun's action. So noun's gerund or noun's action are the two ways that you can express that same idea. Here we have the noun's gerund, human beings, apostrophe, possessive, human beings own burning of fossil fuels. So it's unusual to see that on the GMAT. Again, a lot of times it prefers to use things other than the gerund, again, which is the noun aspect of the verb. The GMAT prefers to use other things because the gerund can sometimes be mistaken for the participle. So for clarity reasons, the GMAT doesn't like the gerund, but sometimes it's going to be right, and you just have to be open to that. And choice C has that. Let's see if we have an answer that gets rid of that gerund and fixes and doesn't introduce new errors. Okay, so D, global warming, which most scientists agree on as a phenomenon caused by human beings who burn fossil fuels. Well, and so, right. We don't need the which. We can just, noun and then rename the noun in apposition. So that's a problem with choice E too. I can see that already. Which most scientists agree on. You can use the phrase agree on. That's not... but then you don't follow it with as. So, we can agree on a place to eat tonight. That's an acceptable English sentence, but you don't follow it with as, so that's a problem. Agree on as. And caused by human beings who burn fossil fuels. This is, guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's not the fossil fuels' fault, it's the human beings who burn them. Yeah, I guess. But that's kind of an unnecessary shift in meaning in the sentence when really, no matter who is burning the fossil fuels, including somehow they're burning via lightning strike or something, scientists would agree that the burning of fossil fuels is what causes it, no matter who's doing it. So anyway, multiple things wrong with choice D. The big ones being the grammatical error. The shift in meaning to the human beings, it's not something that's needed, but it's not enough to ruin the answer choice on its own. Anyway, choice E, global warming, which most scientists agree to be a phenomenon. So we have agree to be, which is naughty. A phenomenon caused by fossil fuels burned by human beings. Well, again, that fossil fuels burned by human beings, it's actually the act of burning them. So the past tense is a slight shift. It's not really wrong, but it does change the focus a little bit. The other two things, of course, make it wrong on its own or on their own. Choice C is our correct answer. 679, number 119. New theories propose that catastrophic impacts of asteroids and comets may have caused reversals in the Earth's magnetic field, the onset of ice ages, splitting apart continents 80 million years ago, and great volcanic eruptions. So we have a list that, we haven't had one of these for a while, but a list jumps out at us. The things on the list need to be parallel. The things that asteroids and comets may have caused are reversals, onset. They don't all need to be plural. They don't need to be plural to be parallel in a list. If there were multiple reversals but only one onset, in this case we have onset of multiple ice ages. But anyway, we have splitting and eruptions. Okay. Now the issue here with this sentence is basically with this word. It is actually fine as it is. There's a difference between, again, this is the difference between the gerund and the participle. Participles are verbal adjectives. an adjective could not be an item in the list alongside reversals, onset, and eruptions. Those are all nouns. Gerunds are verbal nouns. And the main issue here is making it clear in the sentence that we're dealing with the gerund, which is a noun, to go with this noun, to go with this noun, and to go with this noun. We need to make it clear that it's the gerund. Hey, come on, pen. There we go. Versus the participle, which we've seen a bunch of times where we have some sentence and then an ing word that kind of summarizes what's gone on. So basically, choice A is correct but ambiguous. Choice B, we have the splitting apart of consonants. By putting the word the in front of the gerund, the splitting, it's absolutely clear that we're dealing with the gerund, the noun form of the ing word, as opposed to the adjective form. Well, with the whole phrase, it makes it clear, the splitting apart of consonants. You could still have the word the in front of an ing word, as long as there was a noun right after it. So like the barking dog. There, that's a participle. The gerund would be the barking drives me crazy. That's the participle. You can see how it's an adjective. It's modifying dog, the barking dog. The barking drives me crazy. It's the subject of the sentence. That's the gerund, the verbal noun. Anyway, enough grammar. Choice B has the splitting apart of consonants makes it absolutely clear that we're dealing with the gerund, whereas choice A, it could actually be the participle, and that would be not parallel, and so because it's ambiguous, choice A is less desirable. Choice C has a verb in it. Split apart consonants. We need a series of nouns. Choice D, consonants split apart. It didn't cause consonants split apart. It caused the splitting apart of the consonants. The consonants already existed, and so choice D actually changes what happens. The asteroids and comets didn't make continents. It made smaller continents out of a bigger one. And same thing with choice E. There's a shift in meaning here where the asteroids and comets are the ones making the continents. They caused the continents that were split apart, which is not what happened. They were there before the asteroids and comets. So choice B, the splitting apart of continents, makes splitting a noun to be parallel with reversals, onset, and eruptions, which is what we wanted. Okay, two more. On to page 680, and we move happily on to question number 120. A firm that specializes in the analysis of handwriting claims from a one-page writing sample that it can assess more than 300 personality traits, including enthusiasm, imagination, and ambition. Okay, so this is another one of those, in burning fossil fuels, from a one-page writing sample. It's a modifying phrase that appears in the wrong place and makes the sentence not make sense where it is. So the firm is not somehow on a one-page writing sample and claiming from there. The from a one-page writing sample needs to be after the verb assess, or set apart by commas indicating that it's some other type of attendant circumstance. It should be something like it can assess more than 300 personality traits from a one-page writing sample. That's where that phrase should go. And also, I'd say that's the main issue with A, that phrase appears in the wrong place and actually changes the meaning of the sentence into nonsense, or something illogical. Anyway, choice B, same thing. From a one-page writing sample is in the wrong place. Also, choice B, where it says from a one-page writing sample, it has the ability of assessing. So ability of is wrong. We expect ability to, and any sort of words that have to deal with able. So we would also have to be able to, not of. Anyway, the ability of assessing, it should be the ability to assess. Choice C, a firm that specializes in the analysis of handwriting claims the ability from a one-page writing sample of assessing. So then again we have ability of in choice C, not good. Choice D, a firm that specializes in the analysis of handwriting claims to be able from a one-page writing sample to assess more than 300 personality traits. Okay, that sounds plausible. Choice E, a firm that specializes in the analysis of handwriting claims being able to assess from a one-page writing sample. Well, claims being able. Claims being able to assess. Really, it's kind of hard to claim being. I need to write better. Oh dear. Okay, I'm just going to start over there. I'm trying to think of any English sentence where you would use claim next to the word being. I mean, short of cases where being is the start of like a book title or a movie title. You know, he claims being there is one of his favorite movies. There is a movie called Being There. That's why I picked on that. So aside from things where being is part of some other noun, you would never claim being. You could claim that you are or claim to be able. So the idiom is claim that or claim to, not claim being. So choice D has an incorrect idiom. Choice E has the incorrect idiom. Choice D has the correct able idiom, and the from a one-page sample thing set off by commas, which I mentioned was one of the two ways to deal with it correctly. The other, putting it somewhere after the word assess. So D is our buddy, and we have one more question to do. Page 680, number 121. Sales of wine declined in the late 1980s, but they began to grow again after the 1991 report that linked moderate consumption of alcohol, and particularly of red wine, with a reduced risk of heart disease. Oh boy, okay. So, we have a pronoun, they, which needs to refer back to sales of wine. These are just my predictions. I don't know how many of these show up in the answer choices, but they needs to refer back to sales, so we need a plural pronoun. So the second one is this clearly explaining this link. We link moderate consumption with reduced risk. And then it's moderate consumption of alcohol, in particular of, and note that it does actually repeat the preposition of in the sentence as written to make it clear that it's moderate consumption of alcohol, in particular of red wine. Which kind of makes it clear that we are re-specifying a particular form of the alcohol by repeating the preposition. So even though it seems like an extra word, it actually makes things more clear. So correctly identifying this link, I could see, because remember when you're comparing things or linking things, the right things need to be linked in your phrase. And then there does appear to be kind of a time issue here. I don't know if this is going to end up being something in the answer choices, where it's after this 1991 report that linked these two things together that sales of wine began to grow again. Okay, now I actually think choice A is pretty clear as written, but let's see what the other answer choices do, whether they clarify things or make things worse. Okay, so sales of wine declined in the late 1980s, But after the 1991 report that linked a reduced risk of heart disease with a moderate alcohol consumption, particularly red wine, they began growing again. Okay, so we do have they referring back to sales still, just going down my list. Let's talk about this link. It linked a reduced risk of heart disease with a moderate alcohol consumption. One of the issues here is that you really shouldn't be modifying nouns with other nouns. It happens a lot in English, and it happens more and more, partially because English has Germanic roots where you can just make, put two nouns together to make a bigger noun that captures that whole concept. But it probably should be consumption of alcohol, not alcohol consumption. That's an issue. The other issue then is that it's no longer parallel when we say alcohol consumption, particularly red wine. We're paralleling consumption with red wine as opposed to alcohol with red wine. Because remember, in our previous sentence, we had moderate consumption of alcohol, particularly of red wine. So we are paralleling consumption and red wine grammatically, which is not as clear. Again, context, of course, if someone said this to you on the street, you would understand what they were saying, but it's not as clear here. Choice C, sales of wine declined in the late 1980s, but in a 1991 report, moderate alcohol consumption, and particular of red wine, which was linked with a reduced risk of heart disease, caused them to begin to grow again. Ugh. Okay, so definitely wordy. Also, it's red wine that's singled out grammatically. That's linked to the reduced risk of heart disease, and we need it to be consumption of alcohol. Whoops, I'm rewriting red wine. Reduced risk. That's a problem. Also, we have moderate alcohol consumption and particular of red wine. It's not parallel. We would need of red wine and consumption of alcohol. So choice C definitely out. Choice D, sales of wine declined in the late 1990s, but with a reduced risk of heart disease linked in a 1991 report with moderate alcohol consumption, in particular red wine, they began growing again. So the whole phrase, linked in a report with moderate alcohol consumption. It sounds like the report has moderate alcohol consumption and the heart disease was linked in there. So the logic of choice D is really screwed up by the order of the modifying phrases. Choice E, sales of wine declined in the late 1990s, but a reduced risk of heart disease linked to moderate alcohol consumption in a 1991 report, and in particular red wine, started them growing again. So all the phrases are in the wrong order there. In choice E, it sounds like there's moderate alcohol consumption in a 1991 report when we really want the link to be in the 1991 report. Also, we have in a 1991 report and in particular red wine. So there's moderate alcohol consumption in a 91 report and moderate alcohol consumption in particular red wine. In particular in red wine? I don't know. So even though, again, context would, because your knowledge of English, is so deep, you could make sense of choice E. If somebody read that to you, you would still roughly understand what they were saying, but you might kind of shake your head a little bit and, get a little frustrated with that sentence. But if you are doing this writing for a wide audience, you need to write as clearly as possible. Choice E is definitely not clear. Choice A is about as clear as it gets. Sales of wine declined in the late 1980s, but they began to grow again after the 1991 report that linked moderate consumption of alcohol, and in particular of red wine, with a reduced risk of heart disease. Choice A is the clearest. Okay, we will stop there. My name's Jim Jacobson. We will pick up next time on page 680 with question number 122. And you've been watching Grockit.com. We're doing the OGTV edition of the GMAT official guide. So, hope to see you next time.